Good morning, everyone. I am CA Parminder Kaur, Secretary Accounting Standards Board. I, on behalf of the Accounting Standards Board of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, welcome you all to today's webinar on Financial Reporting, Transformation Journey and Road Ahead. This program is being organized by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India with Ministry of Corporate Affairs as part of Government of India's initiative Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav to commemorate and celebrate 75 years of India's independence. At this occasion, we would like to highlight the journey that the nation has traveled to establish a sound financial reporting system in the country, the milestones that have been achieved, and the progress made so far. We will also take this opportunity to understand what the vision the learned speakers for today's deliberations have for the future of financial reporting in the country. Now we can start today's journey of today's deliberations with the address and opening remarks of our Honorable President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, CA Nihar Niranjan Jambusaria ji. He is leading the profession with his vision and organizational skills. He is the member of Professional Accountants in Business Advisory Group of International Federation of Accountants. CA Nihar Jambusaria ji is representing ICAI on various important committees and boards of Indian government and regulators relating to policy formulation that include Government Accounting Standards Advisory Board and Audit Advisory Board. He is also a member of Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India and part-time member of National Financial Reporting Authority of India and member of SEBI's Primary Market Advisory Committee. Now I invite President Sir for his address to the participants and his words of wisdom. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Parminder. The Chairman of the Accounting Standards Board, CNP Vijay Kumar, past President of the Institute, CS Nilesh Vikamsi ji, Amarjit Singh ji, ED SEBI, Charanjit Singh Atra ji, and all the speakers who are going to speak today. It's a matter of great pleasure that as a part of celebration of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, we are discussing a very important aspect which is so relevant for the entire nation. That is the journey of financial reporting right from the time the accounting profession was set up till today. And we all are witnesses that it has got glorious journey commencing from 1949 when the institute was established. And right from that time, the institute has endeavored to see that the financial reporting achieves all objectives which the government and the stakeholders have. The accounting standards were developed, and particularly I remember after 2005, more and more accounting standards were developed. Then we switched over to Ind AS, and number of disclosures have been added. The auditing standards were accordingly revised, and the reporting has come to a stage where the financial statements of any company would really report on whatever is necessary. Till what we find is expectations of stakeholders and public are increasing from the financial reporting. And from time to time, the role of auditor is being discussed at length. We also understand that as time changes and as people's and stakeholder and government's expectations go up, even we should try to cover and see that we meet the expectations. And with that objective, from time to time, the Institute Accounting Standard Board has very proactively dealt with the reporting requirements, have discussed this in very detail, and it is a journey. It is a continuous journey of revision, upgradation, upskilling of professionals, and I think at the same time, upskilling of readers of financial statements is also required. So at this stage, I would welcome this initiative of the Accounting Standard Board, that in the celebration that the country has Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, it selected a very important topic today, and very expert and experienced auditors are here to speak on reporting requirements, its journey and the way forward. Thank you so much for inviting.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words and the address and showing us the path for the future. Now we move on to our first session on importance of financial reporting in effective working of capital markets by Shri Amarjeet Singh Ji from SEBI. He is presently working as Executive Director in charge of Corporate Finance Department of SEBI. He has been working with SEBI for more than 25 years and has extensive experience in regulation and supervision of securities markets. Mr. Amarjeet Singh has been involved in various international regulatory initiatives. He was SEBI's representative on the board of International Organization of Securities Commissions for 7 years. He represents SEBI as a part-time member on the board of National Financial Reporting Authority and on the board of governors of Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs. So I request Amarjeet sir to please address for this session on importance of financial reporting in effective working of capital markets.
Thank you. Thanks for that kind introduction. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Fine. So good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be a part of this important event, and I thank organizers ICAI for inviting me to this event. Let me start with stating the obvious, and the obvious is that accounting and audit professionals play an absolutely vital role in our economy and society. So their role in public financial markets, which operate, many of you would know this, that securities market work on the principle of disclosures. So their auditor's role is particularly critical. Full, accurate, and timely disclosure is the lifeblood of any securities market, which can claim to be fair and efficient. And it is absolutely essential for investors to make informed investment decisions. As we all know, there are a lot of repercussions when truth in financial reporting gets compromised in a listed company. It not only has serious financial consequences for the investors, but it also disturbs their faith and trust in the securities market. So as securities market regulator, ensuring truth in financial reporting is our mandate. And if I can say, as a part of our mandate, we see auditors as a critical gatekeeper for ensuring the integrity of the markets. ICAI, as we all know, plays a very significant role in the securities market and investor protection through your standard setting work and implementation work in the areas of accounting, audit, and ethics. Out of these, the ethics component gets much less talked about, but I believe perhaps that is as important as the other two. In my remarks today, what I will like to do is I'll begin with a rear view as to how the financial reporting landscape has evolved over the last 2 decades. I will then briefly dwell upon the accounting and auditing reforms which have been introduced by SEBI, particularly in the last 10 years. I will also like to talk about some of the regulatory concerns which continue to persist despite a range of reforms that have been introduced. I will also, briefly reflect upon what our expectations are from the audit profession and how the role of the audit profession, to my mind, how that dynamic is changing. And before concluding, I'll briefly touch upon the recent trends which have, to my mind, implications for the accounting and audit profession. I'll be brief, a lot of issues, but I'll be brief on each of these issues. So first, let me begin with the rear view. As I said, the financial reporting landscape underwent a major transformation at the turn of this century, when during the early 2000s, there was a series of high-profile financial reporting and audit failures. As a result, and this I'm talking globally, billions of dollars in market value had disappeared, leading to a public outcry. The bankruptcies of Enron, WorldCom, and the collapse of Arthur Andersen, which used to be one of the world's most prestigious audit firms, they are symbols of that era. This goes back 20 years. These accounting frauds led to fundamental accounting and auditing reforms. We are all familiar with SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley Act, setting up of PCOAB, oversight of the securities regulator in US. Important point to note, I think that was a turning point, if I can call it, for the profession. The accounting profession's long tradition of self-regulation came to an end in many ways, in many markets. The SOX Act enhanced accountability of senior corporate executives and management, brought in greater focus on the company's internal financial controls and restrictions on non-audit services. The Satyam scandal back home in 2009, I think that was our Enron moment. That was India's Enron moment, leading to shifts in the audit architecture in India. So post Satyam, I'll briefly talk about what SEBI did. SEBI mandated for listed companies a limited review or statutory audit only by those auditors who had subjected themselves to the peer review process of ICAI. I think that was an important change we brought about. Another important change worth mentioning was introduction of half-yearly disclosures of a statement of asset liability position for listed companies by SEBI. Then, of course, the new Companies Act of 2013 that brought in a number of measures to enhance the independence of auditors, such as mandatory auditor rotation and restrictions on non-audit activities. The new Companies Act also provided for the setting up of the National Financial Reporting Authority, NFRA, as an independent audit regulator, but which was belatedly constituted in 2018. Let me now, the second part of my address, talk about some of the specific steps which have been taken by SEBI during the last decade or so. And since you're all familiar with it, just to give you a flavor, I'll just briefly touch upon those measures. So we've enhanced the role of, for example, the audit committee on scrutiny of intercorporate loans and investments. Related party transactions has been a focus of our attention. So we brought in the prior approval of audit committee for all RPTs, shareholder approval for material RPTs, and disclosure of RPTs on a half-yearly basis. We mandated setting up of a vigil mechanism for all listed companies. We brought in stringent guidelines relating to reporting disclosure of material events. Quantification of audit qualifications, mandatory disclosure of consolidated quarterly results and cash flow statement on a half-yearly basis, disclosure of total fees for all services paid to the statutory auditors and all entities in the network firm on a consolidated basis. These are some other measures which we took. And more recently, we stepped in and strengthened the disclosures regarding resignation by auditors, and also taken steps for ensuring completion of pending limited review or audit report prior to the resignation of auditors. Another important development which I would like to mention is the financial results are now disclosed in the XBRL format. The use of XBRL ensures that investors and other stakeholders have access to high quality comparable information. On the enforcement side, wherever the cases which warrant action, SEBI has taken steps to bar the audit firms for a specified period from certifying the accounts of listed companies. We have recently, and that's an internal step that we've taken, we've recently strengthened our corporate finance investigation wing. This department is majorly manned by chartered accountants, and the objective is to holistically investigate securities laws violations involving different components of the financial reporting processes, which would include integrity and accuracy of the financial statements and other financial disclosure issues. So, this continuous engagement in the financial reporting space clearly demonstrates the high priority that we attach to this area. Let me now move to the third component of my address. What are the areas of concerns? What are our expectations from the audit profession? So, despite having a strong framework of corporate governance laws, and let me also add there, these regulations that we have for corporate governance, they're comparable with the best in the world. Despite having improved monitoring of corporate behavior and better enforcement, there are issues and concerns which continue to bother us as regulators. While one very general concern, we've brought in a number of disclosure requirements. There's a plethora of disclosure requirements today. But the issue is, are those disclosures adequate? Adequacy and the quality. What is the quality of those disclosures? So that is one general issue that we have on the adequacy and quality. Specific areas of concerns relate to, again, going back to related party transactions, valuations, use of complex transactions or structures to divert funds. I will not name the cases, but we all know a couple of years back, we witnessed a number of cases where complex structures were used to carry out transactions against the interest of minority shareholders. These transactions were bordering on fraud, if I can say. So these complex structures were apparently used to circumvent the laws governing related party transactions. Again, there are numerous examples of misuse of RPT, such as extension of loans and advances by listed company to related parties, which are subsequently not repaid, or they are, those loans are extended on terms and conditions which are very favorable to the parties. And mind you, these loans are not even impaired in the books. They just continue from year to year. And we've seen several instances of that. Mortgaging of land and assets by the listed company, or extension of corporate guarantees by the listed company to secure loans raised by promoters and group companies. And mind you, these financial accommodations which the companies raise may not be in the economic interest of the company, but they are, secured for the benefit of promoters and group companies. So, we also have concerns on valuation of assets, valuation of undertakings, especially in case of transactions with related parties. Area of valuation, since there is not much of regulation, it's a rather nebulous area. And our experience is that the valuations are, used or perhaps misused, if you want to call it, to suit one's convenience. So these are some important areas that we want auditors to focus and report on in case they observe any misuse or abuse. I think these are important areas to take note of. Now let me just spend a minute on the changing role dynamic of audit profession according to my perception. So with development of strict corporate governance codes and new reporting standards, both in accounting and auditing, auditors' role has implicitly enhanced to a great extent, as against the traditional role of merely assessing the true and fair value of a corporation. And this is a global phenomena. In the UK, as many of you would be aware, the big four auditing giants faced heightened scrutiny and a number of fines following multiple corporate collapses. And this has been followed by, a number of proposed reforms to reduce the conflicts of interest and improve the regulatory oversight. Back home, recent amendments to the Companies Act, audit rules, notification of CARO, I think these are all aimed at enhancing audit accountability and disclosures. I believe that once these new rules are effective, the bar for due diligence in audit and audit quality will further increase. Now let me, talk a little bit about recent trends and challenges before I conclude. So I think there are many things happening today which are impacting the entire corporate world, the entire accounting world, the auditing world. So to my mind, I will put my fingers on three important trends which I think have implications for the accounting and auditing profession. The first one is obvious again, the impact of technology. So technology is impacting the way financial data can be captured, can be managed, analyzed, presented, delivered. In so many ways, the financial data is getting impacted. The handling of financial data is getting impacted. So I believe auditors are exploring new approaches to technology and analytics to perform their assurance function. I believe, and this is what I read somewhere, auditors have started using drones for inventory observations. Data analytics also has the potential to replace sampling techniques with analysis of all transactions and accounts and assessing risks on a continuous basis. In fact, even we are looking at using data analytics in terms of when we do our inspections, in terms of covering much larger set of intermediaries with the help of technology than we could have otherwise done, and much larger pools of data. There's a capacity to look at that. And also, the assessment of risks can be done on a continuous basis in real time. Intelligent tools can be used to flag for any anti-money laundering, suspicious activity reporting, identification of trading activity anomalies, and identification of missing or inconsistent data. I mean, these are just to give you some instances. So the potential is really huge. And freed from time-consuming manual reviews, just to state the obvious, technology may provide auditors with more time to exercise their business and financial expertise. That time could perhaps help auditors sharpen their ability to more effectively identify indicators of errors or indicators of fraud. Second important trend is increasing thrust on non-financial reporting. So there has been lately talk of shift of focus from shareholders to stakeholders, broadening of the corporate purpose, and so on. So as a result of that, and if that debate goes forward, the audience for corporate reporting is expanding. I mean, who reads the financial reports and who are the users? So that audience is actually expanding. So due to such shifts, conventional financial reports are increasingly not meeting the needs of users. Today, a large amount of valuable information sits outside the financial statements, which is pushing for integrated and sustainable reporting. Research studies, if you look at the literature which is available, studies done by NYU Stern indicate that financial information in quarterly and annual reports is only 5 to 6% of the total information used by investors for decision making. Another interesting finding is that during the 1950s and 1960s, stock prices were essentially mostly driven, you can say roughly 80 to 90% by corporate earnings and book value. Today, however, that figure has fallen to only 50%, so which shows how non-financial information is becoming more important. So this, let me talk very briefly about what SEBI has done in this space. So we have recently come out with our BRSR, Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting Framework. And this, I believe, is a quantum leap in the area of non-financial disclosures in India for listed companies. BRSR shall be applicable to the top 1,000 companies by market cap on a voluntary basis from this ongoing financial year and on a mandatory basis from April 1, 2022. So I believe ICAI also has taken initiative in this space. The Sustainability Reporting Standard Board of the ICAI, which has been set up recently, I believe will have an important role to play in this space going forward. And let me also compliment ICAI for that. I think that's a very timely move. Third, trend which I picked up is the rise of non-financial capital. Again, it's not the rise, I would say increasing significance of the non-financial capital. It rose much earlier. So today, the financial capital is rapidly losing its preeminence to a combination of human capital, intellectual capital, natural capital, and social capital. The intellectual capital is actually predominating in today's new age tech world. The new age tech companies are innovative, they are asset light, they are high on revenue expenditure, and they are focused on growth. The business model of new age tech companies is not amenable to valuation through conventional metrics of profitability. So I believe this again has implications for corporate reporting, for accountants, for auditors. I would now like to conclude. So, the sum and substance of what I'm trying to say is that the society's expectations from corporates, from regulators, from auditors, from accountants, all the stakeholders, they have been on the rise in the last, especially last 1 or 2 decades. And we very clearly see the evidence of that. And these expectations are reflected in the numerous legislative changes. See, these are, when I say regulatory expectations, these are not necessarily, we reflect the expectations of the society because we are interacting with so many stakeholders all the time. Our markets and economy, talking specifically in the context of financial reporting, our markets and economy are critically dependent on reliable financial information. The challenge is common for all the stakeholders, regulators, companies, accountants, auditors, to foster and maintain public confidence in financial reporting and therefore in securities markets. I believe, there's always scope for improvement. So you please take this in that light. Overall, further improvement in quality of gatekeeping by auditors can tremendously help. Auditors' signatures, and you know this because you practice it all the time, auditors' signatures are very powerful and a testimony to the trust in the truth. People believe in what the auditors sign on, or people would like to believe what the auditors sign on. Therefore, the auditor's role is simply too important, and I emphasize it's too important not to get right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your insightful session covering very important areas like what has been done so far under financial reporting to address the challenges and increasing needs of users and stakeholders, regulators, and what are the expectations from the auditors, importance of non-financial reporting, and the growing needs of the stakeholders. Thank you so much, sir. Now we move on to the next session, that is panel discussion of today's topic, financial reporting, transformation journey and road ahead. Now, I will invite CA Sudhir Soni ji, who is our special invitee at ASB, who would be the moderator for today's panel discussion. He is a special invitee at ASB and also he is partner at one of the top multinational audit and accounting firms in India. He has more than 25 years of experience. He has a specialization in financial statement auditing and accounting advisory services, and he has participated and led statutory audits of several large multinational and Indian companies in different sectors. He participates in number of technical committees of the ICAI, and we have very distinguished panel of members and learned members of the profession who will participate in the panel discussion. So I'll just hand it over to the to CA Sudhir Soni ji for panel discussion on the topic. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Parminder, for that introduction. Good morning to all the panelists and also to the attendees for our webinar today. It is indeed a pleasure to moderate this panel, which will explore the journey of financial reporting in India and also provide a glimpse of the way forward. The ICAI has steered the financial reporting landscape in this country over several years. It has balanced aligning the standards with the global standards, and at the same time keeping local imperatives and issues in mind. Besides being a standard setter, the ICAI has played a very important role in educating both preparers, users, and auditors about the accounting standards and helping them in discharge of their respective functions. I'm indeed pleased to have such an eminent panel, which I think each of the individuals on this panel have played a very important role in shaping the financial reporting journey over the years. And I'll just make a brief introduction of the panelists, all of whom you would already, I think, know, but it's for the record, let me put their introductions in place. I think we have CA Amarjit Chopra, past president ICAI. He is a part-time member also of the National Financial Reporting Authority. Prior to that, besides being past president, he was also former chairman of NACAS. He has contributed significantly to professional development of auditing and accountancy discipline over the years, probably been part of every important initiative that the Institute has made in this period. We have CA Nilesh Vikamsi, also past president of ICAI, former chairman of Federal Bank, and on the board of several companies as independent director. He has served the profession with his technical knowledge of financial reporting, member of the IAASB reference group on audits of less complex entities, and member to numerous regulatory boards and groups formed by IRDA and SEBI. We have CATV Mohandas Pai. Mr. Pai was awarded the Padma Shri Award by the President of India in 2015. He is currently chairman of Manipal Global Education, the former director at Infosys over a career spanning 37 years. He has served in virtually all areas of operations of the company. And what I would like to especially mention about Infosys, I think one of the first companies which reported its numbers under several frameworks, several different frameworks, and probably was a trendsetter in that regard. We have CA Charanjit Atra, CFO of SBI. He is a special invitee at the Accounting Standards Board. A banking sector veteran, Charanjit was partner at one of the top audit and accounting firms in India for 5 years, and then took over as CFO of State Bank of India. His very deep experience in both advising and now, of course, implementing the standards at the banks. We also have Mr. MP Vijay Kumar, who is the chairman of the Accounting Standards Board. And I will keep inviting him on this panel for his expert inputs to the panel. So great. Very nice to have you gentlemen on this panel. Let me start with requesting Mr. Chopra to highlight the milestones of financial reporting in the country over the years. Chopra ji, over to you.
Chopra, you need to unmute yourself. You need to unmute yourself. Yeah.
I think, yes. Thank you very much, Sudhirji, and thanks to the ESB for organizing this particular program and providing us all the opportunity, and nice to interact with many friends here, including Mr. Mohandas Pai for that particular matter, who has his own views in the various matters, particularly with regard to the accounting standards. I will only like to say that at least I belong to that generation who probably qualified the examination of chartered accountancy only because of the reason that there were no accounting standards at that time when we were being examined. Because the accounting standard board itself came up in 1977 and I had qualified in 1975. So I was very lucky. Never had to answer any questions on accounting standards or auditing standards. And that was probably one of the reasons to have it qualified comfortably. But let me say one thing, that Accounting Standard Board, which was formed in 1977, over the years has played a very important role. We came up with the first accounting standard on AS1 way back in 78. But look at the journey. I think the journey has been slow, the journey has been fast. There have been ups and downs so far as this particular journey is concerned, but it has been very interesting. 78 to 98, when I entered the council, there were just 15 accounting standards. Let's be very clear about it. And the last accounting standard, AS15, had come even maybe 3 to 4 years before one had joined the council. And then AS16 came in. But after AS16, there was a spate of the accounting standards, if you really ask me. And most of those standards were reporting standards, basically the disclosure standards, if you ask me. These were not dealing with the measurement or recognition, whether it was a related party transaction or it was with regard to the segmental reporting or it was with regard to the earning per share or discontinued operations. Then there was a spate, because I think the institute was also expecting one thing, that if the institute didn't do it, probably the government will say, okay, we bring in the IFRS as it is. So the institute also hastened the process and brought in those accounting standards. I think that was very, very important. And in between, and I still remember in 2008, 2009, when Mr. Ved Jain was the president, we came up with 3 standards which were most difficult, very frankly, with regard to the financial instruments. 30, 31, 32. Which were never made mandatory. That's also a peculiar thing and had to be later on withdrawn. But the journey has been fabulous. There is no doubt in my mind. And in 10-11, we tried our level best, going by the commitment of the Honorable Prime Minister at that particular point of time, that we had to introduce, effective 1/4/2011, the Ind AS. That's the equivalent to IFRS in this country. Some or the other, institute did its job, but the government couldn't complete its job for various reasons. I don't want to spell out those reasons. But effective 1/4/2016, we have come up with the Ind AS, and there are now challenges which I think we may debate a little later, whether we have completed at least 3 of the cycles, but one of the cycles, the main cycle with regard to implementation of this in the financial sector, still remains. I think this has been an interesting journey, but to me the most interesting part was when the government constituted NACAS and said that institute would recommend the accounting standards to NACAS and NACAS would recommend it to the government for notification. Now what happened in the process was, and when the section 211(3)(c) was brought in, what happened in the process was, till that particular point of time, the client used to ask us what accounting standard. Now it was the client's responsibility to make sure that the accounting standards were complied with. And if at all there was non-compliance, the auditor was only supposed to report that there was a non-compliance. I think that was very interesting. And to my mind, that actually led to a lot of strengthening of the accounting standards vis-a-vis the financial statements. And to me, you see the interesting part, Sudhirji, has been cash flow statement should have been mandatory right from the word go. We couldn't make it mandatory for a very long time. And then in the case of private limited companies, we had come up with the classification way back in 2004. We had divided the various entities into the three categories, category 1, category 2, category 3, which has now recently has been now extended to 4 categories for that matter. Now, the point that I am trying to drive you home is that it has been a fantastic journey. It has been a fabulous journey. There's no doubt in my mind. Institute has been proactive in certain matters so far as this particular part is concerned. But the real challenge, when the 2013 Companies Act came in, what happened at that particular point of time? The definition of financial statements was underwent a change. And when it underwent a change, the cash flow statement became mandatory automatically. Now you can't have any financial statement without a cash flow statement. So I think it is over the years that the things have evolved and will continue to evolve. I am very sure about it. And I think the Institute will keep on working in this particular direction. We have come up with, in some of the standards, we became even leaders. If you look at the standard on agriculture, I think we have been the leaders so far as that particular part is concerned. Even with regard to property, plant and equipment, in certain matters, we have been leaders recently. So there have been very interesting aspects, and I think Indian accounting profession as such has done very well globally, and we need to continue this particular stride. There used to be a time, I think Mohanji will also bear me out, and each one of the panelists will bear me out, when the response to the accounting standards, which were the draft by the international bodies, was very poor from our side. But today, I think over the last about 12 to 13 years or 14 years, our response to those drafts have been very good. And that is where we have been able to contribute very positively in that particular direction. I only wish that the Institute continues in that particular positive direction in the years to come.
Sure. Thanks for those comments. Very interesting. Nilesh, Amarjit ji referred to section 211.
Did we lose Sudhir, MPV?
Yeah, I think he'll join back.
Yeah, he's there.
He's fine.
Sudhir, we lost you in between. Yeah.
You are referring to the section which constituted NACAS and of course the...
Sudhir, can you hear us now? We lost you in between.
No, can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Yeah. So Nilesh, I wanted to ask you about the Companies Act role in financial reporting. I think the Institute has done a lot. In parallel, the Companies Act also was responding. What are your comments on the Companies Act contribution in this journey?
Yeah, thanks, Sudhir. And first of all, I want to thank the Accounting Standards Board and the Institute for, making me part of this very, very esteemed panel to be with Amarjit Chopra Sahab, Mohandas Pai, Charanjit, yourself and MPV. I think it's an honor in itself. Before I get into the Companies Act, I just want to supplement two major events in the accounting standards journey. One was, of course, 2002 to 2003, where almost 16 standards came. But more importantly, when the Honorable Prime Minister Manmohan Singh gave a commitment way back, I think in 2009, in the G20, that we'll be coming out with the IFRS converged standards. I remember I joined the council then. Chopra Sahab was the president, and in 1 year, 35 IFRS converged standards came in, and you can understand the quantum of work done. There were different study groups, then the discussions with the board, discussions with the council, and then giving to the NACAS, getting comments from NACAS, and then closing it. So the whole the journey, 35 standards in 1 year, the amount of work under the leadership of Chopra Sahab was just humongous. Mr. Manoj Fadnis was the chairman ASB, and my first year in the council, and let me tell you, it was a fantastic year. Coming to the Companies Act, Sudhir, which you asked, I think the financial reporting has been part of the Companies Act way back from 1882. I just did some research. The Indian Companies Act 1882 had a format, a T form. Currently we have the vertical format, earlier with the T form. And for 31 years, and the section 78 said true accounts. Currently we are talking of true and fair view accounts. That time there were true accounts, which was there in the T format. Then come 1913 Act, which was there till 1956. For 43 years again, we had a format of the T format of the accounts. 1956, the Companies Act was amended, and that remained till 2013 when the major changes happened. And we had this 211(3)(c), which you mentioned, and which said true and fair. From true, we shifted to true and fair in 1956. Initially, I think the T format continued, and somewhere in 1979, the vertical format came in, the way we are looking at things. And the journey has been evolving. There have been some amendments there. And the major amendment in the 1956, the Schedule 6, as it was then called, was in 2011. And when the concept of current and non-current came in, the current liabilities and the current non-current liabilities. And again, let me tell you the role of the institute then. I remember I was part of a study group which looked at that particular Schedule 3, and we looked at the Indian industrial, background, and any breach of covenant of a liability, of a term liability also of a bank could have become, the liability could have become current. But we were, the study group escalated the matter to the Accounting Standard Board and in turn to the council. And the whole council debated, that time Chopra Sahab also was part of the council. And we took a very, very pragmatic view, looking at the Indian situation, that minor breach of covenants of a loan agreement will not make the liability current if it is remain non-current. Again, looking at the Indian, I would say the ground reality. So I think that has been a major, decision that continued in the Ind AS later on, when the Ind AS came in. So that was 2011. Come 2013, we had the new, Companies Act, which brought in the Schedule 3. This also was amended when the Ind AS came in 2016. So 2016, we had Division 1 of the Schedule 3, which was for the non, I would say, Ind AS companies, the old Indian accounting standards. And Division 2 was for the Ind AS based, companies. And later on 2018, when Ind AS was made mandatory for the NBFCs, Division 3 came in for the Ind AS based, reporting companies for NBFCs at that point of time. So there has been a huge, evolution. And the latest one, the 2021 amendment, I just want to get upon how the other regulators also are sort of focusing on financial reporting, and a lot of information which may, not truly classify as financial reporting is also being brought in. The likes of, for example, any relationship with struck-off companies. Now, I don't know how we are going to do this, the amount of work which is going to take. 3 lakh companies searching the data, and across all transactions, receivables, payables, investments, liabilities, matching. And I think it will be a separate exercise in itself, which is coming in. And just to give you, we did a mock run in one of our clients, and in one of the commercial paper issuances or NCD issues, one of the struck-off companies had invested in that. That is all those, may not be, there's no the direct connection, but inadvertent investments and all would be there, and that will come in. Then giving a detailed breakup of the capital work in progress. So what is happening is whatever problems the regulator is finding, whatever scams or wrongdoings, I think by way of financial reporting change, it is coming in. For example, any delay in a capital work in progress, they must have found that, some WIP just goes on and on, capital work in progress. So they have asked for the aging of the capital WIP. So that will force, the managements to look at, number one, whether to stop the interest capitalization, number two, whether to look at the impairment if at all required. So that is being forced through the reporting, I would say, format, financial reporting format. And then again, from a better understanding, the dues of the trade payable and receivables, from the due date, what is the aging up to 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, and so on and so forth. So it will give a better, understanding. Then again, the unaccounted transactions coming in. So I think some of these matters, we may not classify as pure accounting reporting, but information required and which will give a better reading to the stakeholders, that is coming in. So that's a broad journey on the Companies Act, and it's still evolving.
Sure. Nilesh, I will come back on Schedule 3 a bit later. Let me go to Mr. Mohandas Pai. And Mohan, how do you see financial reporting having contributed? You've seen you've seen it from so many different perspectives. Advising the government, looking at it from a board member perspective, as a corporate. How do you see this financial reporting journey, and has it contributed to bringing greater investments or providing confidence to capital markets in India?
Well, I think the financial reporting process in this country has been truly extraordinary and has contributed much to the creation of the financial markets, the stock markets, flow of capital, etc. I do not go with people who criticize India unnecessarily, saying the quality of financial reporting is low or that the corporate governance standards are low. I do not go with that at all. And I see no reason why I have to change my opinion at any point of time in the last 30 years. Because every country has its own ethos, and no country is exemplary that it stands out for any governance, not the UK, not the US, not any country. Let's be clear about that, all right? Every country has got corporate failure. It happens during times of boom and a downturn, and it will continue to happen for the foreseeable future, whatever the standards are. Every country will have people who are fraudulent, who create frauds and use the financial statements to raise money. And every country will have audit failure. It is part of the capitalistic system in which we live. The key issues are, what is the percentage of such wrong things happening, and what happens when action is taken, whether action is taken in case of such a failure. And I think these are the things, and if you compare that, India comes out in the top 5 globally, and that is good news. That's point number 1. Second, I do believe that Institute of Chartered Accountants has done an extraordinary job in managing the complexity of the Indian economy. Many of us, myself included, sometimes are impatient. We criticize and stand we should move faster. But I don't run the institute. I'm not part of the institute body. And if you are the president of the institute like Amarjit Chopra ji was, the chair of the IAS, chair of the Accounting Standards Board, you understand the difficulties, because hundreds of companies will come and tell you the difficulty. There are live examples, there are everything else. Now, I was CFO of Infosys. My control of the company is very good. We are a small company compared to the entire system. A large company in value, but small company. We didn't have the complexities. We didn't have to answer hundreds of people like maybe President Amarjit Chopra, President Nilesh had to do, or answer government, and we are a democracy. So it is a very difficult position for them to do, and I appreciate what they have done, and I must compliment them formally here, Amarjit ji, that people have done a fabulous job. The third thing is, people in India must understand that there are a large number of companies, more than maybe, maybe 1 million, 1.5 million companies. There are millions of partnership firms, millions of entities, and all in different stages of development. The profession is small compared to India's need in terms of highly qualified people. And it's an emerging market. It's not a mature market with high growth rate. And there are complexities all through. And there are local market demands. There change happening in financial disclosure and publication the last 20 years. And I think in the end of it, if you sit back and look at it, it's been handled extremely well. The limited point that I have to make in a globalized world with capital moving freely is that the world moves on brands. The world has no time to look at what you're doing, how good you are, etc. Because the world moves on checklists. There is a checklist, and you have to tick all the boxes and checklist. If you tick the checklist, you are passed. If you don't tick one tick list, you are failed. They don't care to go into details. They don't care into the nuances of the situation anywhere in the world. That is how the global financial markets work, because everybody is busy and everybody has got a lot of investments to do, etc. Now, India has got a lot of FDI. If somebody says Indian accounting is not good, what about all the FDI? We got about $500 billion in the capital markets. In the private markets, we got another $300 billion of capital coming in. $82 billion FDI came in. And that means investors are voting with their feet. And will investors continue to vote with their feet if they feel that accounting is bad, this is bad? I don't think so. And they're voting. And we're seeing this upsurge of value for the last 20 years. I mean, right from the time we opened up in 91, this has been going up and this has been going up. So I think that is one issue. So my limited issue is we must understand in India that not everybody can follow the same standard. We must understand in India that corporates have different standards, they have different needs. And you must understand in India that the institute as a regulator or a self-regulatory body has to take care of the large divergence, diversity and complexity of India. Yes, that is a responsibility to do. And government has to take care of the needs of everybody in a democracy. And there are many, many people who want different things, and government has to make sure that everybody's needs are taken care of. Now, International Financial Committee community has all moved to certain standards. And they have no time today for people who don't follow the standard and they want the brand and the checklist. And we are stuck in the middle between all of them, having to run a highly complex system, highly diverse system, an emerging market, a growing economy, and the need for our companies to be global. So my 1 point submission at this point of time, after making all these statements, is that we must recognize that the top 100, 200 companies have to be global companies. We must recognize their needs are different and give them the freedom to follow the brand and IFRS freely. Because today, the divergence between IFRS and the Ind AS is very, very small, almost immaterial. And many of the divergences are very specific to certain class of companies, not specific to everybody. Everybody will not have the same challenges. And if you want to follow IFRS, you should have the freedom to follow IFRS. And Japan has given that freedom to companies. And I think that's a very good compromise. And that will make sure that India gets the brand required. And we as corporates who are in the international market, raise international capital, will see a slight reduction in the cost of capital, if at all. And everything will be fine. Then we don't have to have any difference of opinion with anybody. And I would like to end by saying, I want to compliment the Institute for their fabulous journey in the last 15 years. Like Mr. Amarjit Chopra said, that you are now reporting back to IFRS. We've now got MPV there in the interpretation committee. We should have more people on the board, more people interpretation, more technically qualified people. You must do more research. You must respond back to standards. And you must be part of the standard setting process. It's an intellectual exercise that there's no reason why we should be behind. It's just that you must put in the focus and the effort. And I'm very happy the Institute is doing. And that's the way to go. And then, Sudhir, we must dominate the global accounting profession. We are probably the largest number of professional accountants in the world today. I think MPV must have overtaken the United States right now. And we must dominate. We must train 1.5 million, 2 million people in the next 10 years, send them out to conquer the world and become the dominant accounting power in the world. Now we have to work out a strategy how to make that happen, because we have solved our local issues substantially, and that is what we have to see now. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mohan. I think those were very motivating comments, not only for the Institute, but for all the chartered accountants in the country. I think it's for all of them and for the talent in the country. So thanks for that. Let me ask Charanjit for his views on the same topic. And then MPV, I'm going to come to you to respond to, because Mohan made one very specific comment about allowing Indian companies to follow IFRS. I think he acknowledges that the carve-outs are not significant. But at the same time, for the top 200 companies like in Japan, why can't we simply say we are IFRS? And, so I'll come back to you with that question. But Charanjit, firstly, your views on, I think, the contribution of financial reporting to capital building in the country.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Sudhir and the Institute, for giving me this opportunity to speak with the esteemed panel. I totally agree with what Mr. Pai said on, that so much of FDI, so much of FI coming into the country. We had record inflows coming in both in the last year and the first quarter of this year. This clearly reflects the confidence of the investment community, towards India, Indian corporates and Indian economy. Now, one of the important factors which, boost the investor confidence are the governance standards followed by the corporates in an economy or by the country as a whole. And good, stable, transparent financial reporting goes a long way in sort of boosting up the governance standards, giving the comfort to the investor community on the governance followed in a country. It has been traditionally observed that, though in spite of there being, enough growth in the economy or the growth prospects being there in the economy, but if the governance standards are poor, the investments have been found lacking. So, if you look at, our sort of alignment with global accounting standards, going towards into Ind AS, so much of information today is available for investors to make an important investment decision. And that is exactly the reason why so much of FDIs and FIIs are coming into the country. And that clearly reflects. And the role played by the Institute, I know I have been involved in one or the other way, working with Mr. Chopra, working with Nilesh Bhai on various accounting standards, working with ASBs, and we all know what we have gone through either in NACAS or in the ASBs, discussing issues and trying to have the carve-outs. In fact, I would just grab a little bit of opportunity what questions, Sudhir has asked. When we started looking at whether we want to sort of go for a complete IFRS or a carve-out. We started discussing of that aspect. And at that point in time, when we were discussing that, it was very clear that, to start with, there had to be a bridge between the accounting standards we followed and IFRS. I think, but that time has gone, and today is a time when we need to rethink what would be our next steps. And one more thing to discuss what Mr. Pai said is, sir, I think our accountants are already there in the globe and working together. If I go abroad and see, there are a lot of chartered accountants who are working in larger companies, doing larger positions. In fact, at some point in time, even the ISB was headed by an Indian chartered accountant. So, things are done, and that's all because what the institute has done over the period. And we are very proud to be chartered accountants today. And, I believe this financial reporting journey has to end up well. And, this has to be a continuous engine which needs to keep on moving, taking the current market scenarios, the market dynamics, the expectations of the investors. There would be accidents, and I think, as you rightly said, there have been accidents, and there would be accidents in the future because you can't have a smooth road always. There would be accidents. But I think at every point in time, the institute has come up, the ASB has come up with appropriate rectification steps and appropriate disclosures. I think as late as last week when I was discussing with some of my friends who are analysts, and they're saying the sort of information that we get post 2016, particularly in the areas of concentration of risk, concentration of exposures, gives us a lot of comfort in the performance of the company. So I believe, yes, financial reporting plays a great part in establishing the corporate governance of an economy of a country, which in turn boosts into investor confidence in the country, which is directly reflected in the high amount of the FIIs or the FDIs that we get. So even, I was doing some research yesterday on the GDP side. About 1/3 of the GDP today is can be directly related to the corporate earnings, which again has a lot of reliance on the corporate financial reporting. So to that extent, you can't just have a good investor sentiment or a good investor confidence without a very, very transparent, good financial reporting system. So that's where I would like to end. Sudhir, over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Charanjit, for those comments. MPV, you've heard, I think, the past presidents, you've heard Mohan and Charanjit. You have any quick responses to the comments that have been made? I think some interesting points Amarjit made on the Companies Act. Nilesh made that. And Nilesh also made a point around the Schedule 3, which I think we wanted to touch. But maybe if you want to just respond to some of these topics and on the use of IFRS, I think that's a very interesting observation.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sudhir, and thanks to all the panelists for such an open discussion. It's been a good learning as well. Let me confine myself, Sudhir, to the specific question which you asked on can India have IFRS for select companies like what we have in Japan. I am a CFO of a US listed company, so I'm used to starting with the caveat that no forward-looking statements and protection of a safe harbor clause. So I will borrow something similar here as well. I just want to state that at MCA, there is a very active working group which involves multiple regulators, SEBI, IRDA, RBI, and the Ministry of Finance, where there is a continuous review of how do we ensure that the India's journey is complete with having a full convergence with IFRS. There's a very active dialogue continuously happening, and Mohan would recall that maybe a few months back we had an outreach event as well, where himself, Chopra ji, Manoj Fadnis ji, and we had other gentlemen who had deliberated on the same. My own views, Sudhir, maybe it's a good position to have, but maybe a little early for following reasons to even go through a detailed deliberation. One is, as a priority, we would like banks and insurance companies to move to Ind AS to begin with. We'd like that to happen to begin with. And second is, today there are many companies like Infosys who report under Ind AS for India and IFRS globally. and all of us have been able to communicate to the outside world that there is no gap difference. So if you look at whether it's the balance sheet or the income statement or cash flow, we have been able to demonstrate and tell them that Ind AS and IFRS is one and the same. So if somebody asks me, I keep telling them, look, you take any of the companies who are listed in SEC and compare their local reporting. You tell me what is the difference. What is the difference? If at all, thanks to Schedule 3 and SEBI here, you actually have some more additional information which you don't have it in the financial information which you share outside. And that's an answer which I have come across where investors have been fairly satisfied with. The other point which we also need to keep in mind is the Indian taxation authorities as well. There are book profit related taxes and things like that. And India is also looking at, can we phase away with exemptions and bring taxation largely based on book profits. So one more framework to be introduced, the whole taxation environment to settle. It's a little too early. I'm not saying that we should move in that direction, but it's a little early, but it is certainly in the radar. And Japan is a classic example who gets the benefit of claiming their IFRS with just 600 companies following that. And in India, there are 30,000 companies and companies as small as 35 million equity, unlisted companies following Ind AS, which for all practical purposes IFRS. So why not give them the benefit of the brand, which Mohan referred. And one other thing we have to be very conscious of when we go in the direction, Sudhir, and it's an agenda already in the ASB's table. You are aware that at IASB and IFRIC, we have this agenda, the other literature which is there. So currently they are not part of the Ind AS. So how do we make it part of it and all is also a larger discussion. The last point I want to highlight is, I was myself very surprised when I was preparing for that outreach meeting 3 months back when Mohan, Chopra ji and all participated, where I saw that many of the large Indian companies who actually transitioned to Ind AS did not avail the relief provisions which are available in transition. I think that speaks volumes about the quality of Indian enterprise, the Indian boards, Indian management, and the fact that they are seeing the future. And I'm sure the entire Indian regulatory ecosystem will at some point in time recognize. I don't want to give an assurance that it will happen anytime soon, but it definitely is a welcome agenda to discuss.
Sure, thanks MPV for that. Since you've referred to AS, and let me come to this topic. I think the Institute has done a lot for medium and small enterprises. First is in defining the different categories, relaxations, exemptions have been given. But I think one of the important projects you are pursuing is converging IGAAP or upgrading the Indian standards, what we call IGAAP, if I distinguish that from Ind AS, to also almost IFRS equivalence. Let me ask Chopra ji that virtually what we are endeavoring as a nation, and I know Mohan is very ambitious about this, it is that as a nation, we are saying we will have all companies virtually on IFRS, except for some disclosure requirements being dropped. Chopra ji, do you think we can do that? That is one question. And then I'm going to follow up that with Nilesh to say that, chartered accountants are trained, but what about the rest of the country? There are graduates who work on accounting and preparation. How are we dispelling this expertise on IFRS? So, Chopra ji, if I can have your views first.
Sudhirji, I think this is probably one of the most important questions, most rather burning questions if you ask me. I think we at Institute had been discussing this particular part, and I am very clear. It's not a matter of whether we can do it or not. We can't do it. It's a matter of that we will have to do it. I'm very clear about it. In any country, you can't have two kinds of system. You can't continue to live on two kinds of system, that one is on fair value and the other is on cost basis. I think sooner than later, we will have to come back to the fair valuation in respect of all the companies. You can have lesser of the disclosure requirements, but I think the measurement and recognition principles have to be the same across the board. You can't have the measurement and recognition being different. And of course, when it comes to the taxation system is the same for all the companies. It's not going to be different. So even there, we get into the differences mode. So I personally feel that we have to get into that particular mode. And then I think institute will have to grapple with another problem. The bigger non-corporate financial entities, basically. Are you going to look at them from the fair value angle, or it's going to be the cost angle? If you ask me personally, I personally feel that we must have a similar system. We cannot have two systems going on in the same country under any circumstances. So far as the expertise part is concerned, I think when we talk of fair value, we will have to train many chartered accountants also. So far as the fair valuation is concerned, forget about the non-chartered accountants. So our main problem has been that our universities, our schools have not been able to come up to this expectation. I think UGC should take the note, the secondary education should take the note that we have to now start talking about the Indias. We have to start talking in terms of the IFRS standards, basically, so far as the schools or universities are concerned. And even I have been participating in some of the training programs for the faculties, for the colleges. Very frankly, the college teachers are not aware of these standards. That's the problem area. So to me, the major challenge lies in how the institute collaborates with the universities, with the colleges, with the schools to really educate the teachers, so that the teachers can educate the students. I think that is one of the most important areas of concern. If we can do that, and that is a large area, very frankly, it's a very, very large area, because we are such a diverse country, we are such a large country, that training all those people may not be very easy. But unless we do it, it is going to be problematic. So to me, we have no choice. I'm ending up on one note. We have absolutely no choice. But looking at the limitation that our students are not aware of it, our teachers are not aware of it, at what particular point of time we like to bring it in, that I leave to the institute and of course the government.
Let me ask for a quick response from Nilesh and Mohan to this. Nilesh, you can go first.
Thanks, Sudhir. Whilst I appreciate what Chopra Sahab has said, that we should have one uniform accounting across the country and we can't have parallel. But the challenge, Sudhir, what I'm seeing is, especially the MSME and the small entities sector, even the basic application of accounting standards, the earlier accounting standards, is a challenge in the sense that is being done more by the chartered accountants who are the auditors of the company, whether it's disclosure accounting policies or compliance with the standards, the older standards. So the challenge is the preparer. You forget the large corporates and the listed segment where the preparers are geared up to do the accounting properly under Ind AS. But the MSME and the small entity sector, the preparers are not ready. The accountants who are trained, as Chopra Sahab said, the education quality from the universities, colleges, even the old accounting standards, they are not being trained properly. Forget the Ind AS, where we talk of fair value, we talk of IRR, where we talk of financial instruments, accounting, so many things, hedge accounting. So I would believe that is a priority where the institute has a dialogue with the UGC and across the country. How do we up the education level, the accounting education level at the college level? So we have the preparers who are good. And in my view, I think I am looking at a huge opportunity for the country, as Mohan mentioned earlier. If all of us get into this IFRS or Ind AS training, trained, I would say accountants and chartered accountants, I think the world will be an opportunity for us, because more than 150 countries IFRS is applicable, and we have got that pool, the talent pool to execute that. But I would want it to be done in a phase-wise manner, unlike Chopra Sahab, what he mentioned. First, from an accounting standard level, let's get into, I would say, except certain, I would say the fair value accounting or the IR accounting, because the basic preparers themselves are not geared up as of now. So have a time frame of say 5 years, then get into fair value and the IRR accounting, etc. The collection. So it can be a phase-wise thing, is my view, rather than a big jump at one point of time. That's my suggestion.
Mohan, how do you see this? I think what we are basically asking is, should all companies virtually be on IFRS? And I say virtually because you might make minor exemptions for smaller companies, but in a sense, everyone does fair valuation. let's say as a businessman, do you really want that, or do you feel the earlier standards were not able to do it for a small enterprise, and should everyone step up to IFRS? And then the talent as well needs to be built.
Sudhir, is a very complex problem because of diversity. My personal view is the top 1,000, top 2,000 listed companies in this country should be on IFRS because we are part of the global financial architecture. And India needs them and they need the capital, so they should be able to access it. That takes care of the investor requirements, capital flows, etc., everything. We're part of the global system and will be looked at very differently. Now, even the unlisted companies beyond a certain size, because the risk should be there. I think it's important. I remember that we have had a dialogue with RBI. I had met many RBI governors. Amarjit Chopra ji knows about it. And we had told them that banks should move. For example, today RBI has got something called systemically important banks. That is State Bank of India, ICICI, HDFC. Why can't they tell them you go to IFRS and have expected loss? The whole NPA issue in the banking system came up because they were following a traditional formula set up by the Reserve Bank in 91-92 and the Nasiman Committee report. The world has moved on. Now these banks, systemically important banks, which are more than 50% of India's banking, are our exposure to the world. They have got global capital. They can access global capital. Let them go to IFRS and follow expected loss. The rest of the banks can take their own time. And they can make an assessment of expected loss to get training over the next 4 or 8 quarters, give it to RBI. For example, the Fed makes a stress test for all the banks. I think the stress test is very good. I'm a member of KEFRAL and governor comes there. We've been telling you do a stress test of all the Indian banks and give a report. Then you know the true situation. Then you don't have to fear, if they do expected loss, they have to get capital. Where is the capital? Confidence will go down. Those are imaginary figures. See, Sudhir, we have to be part of the global community. We have to grow economy to $10 trillion by 2031-32, and we need the capital, and we need that. We need it at the lowest cost. Our accounting has to be on par or better than global standards. Point number 1. That less clear. Do everybody have to do it? No. The top 1,000, including banks, can do it, and that is fine enough because the global investment universe comes there. And there are enough chartered accountants, enough trained CFOs take care of that. Then comes the problem. What do we do about that? Now there, my view is we should transition over the next 10 years with clear step for most people, barring maybe proprietorship and partnership, smaller ones, to come to India, transition it. Now there we have 2 challenges. One, like Nilesh, Amarjit Chopra said, the college curriculum. Why can't we prepare the accounting college curriculum for the UGC and then give it to them? Now with the new education policy, the greater degree of autonomy, we can have a standardized accounting curriculum where the accounting standards everywhere are taught. We can give them a study material. We can give them video lectures. We can give them a lot of content for training and then hand it over to the universities, write to all the universities, tell them, your academic council, please take this up so that we have 5 to 6 years in which we can make the transition. So you come to 2030, we will have enough trained people. We'll have enough things going ahead to do this. So we have to segment the entire thing and do it. And then lastly, for the small guys, just leave them what they are. I mean, it's up to them to do what they want. Why impose heavy costs? Because there's a cost issue. We don't want the cost to come on people who are not competitive. Let them do that. It's like GST. Finally, we realize in wisdom that GST, why compel everybody to file monthly? Give them time and, give them some waivers, blah, blah, blah. It's okay. They're all sole property. Let them come up. That's fine. Let's leave it that. So I think we need to have a very segmented approach, but we have to be part of the global community. We have to be part of the global financial architecture. We have to take leadership positions. We have to lead. We need research and we have the brain power. We have the trained people. We have everything. We just need the silly brand. I'm using the word silly because, when you have that, people don't recognize that. They just want the chapa. That's the way the world works. You can't fight the battle. It's like ISO 9000, right? Everybody wants the chapa. We're already there, but they need the chapa. So I think this is my thinking that let's not have one solution. One solution fit everybody.
I think that's a very valuable point that you need to make a distinction for public interest entities. And I think our regulatory zeal, very often that distinction has not been as sharp, between what's public interest and what is not public interest. But you also made another very valuable point on the banks and how important it is for them to come into India. Let me ask Charanjit. He's both working, of course, as the CFO of the bank, but he's also worked with a lot of banks to help them come up the curve on Ind AS. Charanjit, how prepared are banks and insurance companies to go into Ind AS, and what do you think will be the most significant challenges?
So let me cover insurance companies and banks separately. As far as the banks are concerned, obviously, we are looking at, as rightly said by Mr. Pai, there are challenges on expected credit loss, and we need to, sort of address that. But there are other challenges for banks on the regulatory and, various other statutes which needs to get changed, because once accounting comes under Ind AS, those statutes would stand in between in things like dividend distribution and things like that. So, that requires a change before we actually bring in the standards. So they all have to come in together. The other part is, yes, as we have been discussing about MSMEs and larger companies, even in banks, to club them into one homogeneous group is going to be difficult, because there are banks which are still struggling and still don't have the systems to implement, expected credit loss in a complete way, or, derivative accounting in a complete way. But there are certainly banks which are systemically important. And, for the past 2-3 years, banks have been sort of preparing and submitting financial statements under Ind AS to markets. As far as preparedness is concerned, most of the banks today are more or less, operationally prepared to prepare Ind AS. It's only the question of how you align the statutes and other interests so that the reporting can become simpler than, getting entangled. Something like, even if you look at business combinations accounting, you enter into goodwill, then that goodwill cannot be on the bank's books of, banks which auto declare dividend. And that could be a big hampener for the investors and all those stuff, because, any returns on the companies will get blocked. So there are other format related challenges. In the banking industry today, we are still reeling around the Schedule 3 format, which is like, something came out in the 90s, and we're still struggling with that format. And once there has to be system upgrades. And then, in banks is like live wire, you'll have to, sort of make those changes in a flying aircraft, right? It's not that you can just shift from 31st March to 1st April with the system change. Something like, amortizing of fees and, accounting for interest on an IRR basis. That would need some lead time. So I would suggest that if banks, yes, the writing is important. It's definitely going to be beneficial to move into IFRS at some point in time. But there has to be a proper bridge laid down between the existing accounting systems and the IFRS system. And maybe time has come to think about of moving banks in a phased manner rather than moving it all at one point in time, because it's not only the statute related issues, but also certain operational issues, because there are millions and billions of transactions happening in a bank on a daily basis. Just closing a bank on a year end or a quarter end is a big exercise in itself. Forget changing of accounting standards and reporting standards. So, that itself will require changes in the basic system. And talking about insurance companies, the same challenges with the insurance companies. With IFRS 17, which has come in, that actually changes the entire way of accounting for, insurance premiums for insurance companies. That also requires a big system change. Globally, that challenge is being faced. Insurance companies have moved on. We have seen that they took 3 to 4 years for actually putting in the systems for doing IFRS 17. We have also started working on the part, when I mean me, it is the insurance companies. The IRDAI has kept a deadline as of 2023 when the insurance companies will move on. And, one needs to be very clear that, insurance, I believe, will have to move before the banks move on to Ind AS, because most of the banks today, if you look in the private sector, hold insurance companies as their subsidiaries. And Ind AS is the primary financial statements are consolidated accounts. So once you want banks to move on to Ind AS, it's very important the insurance companies either move at least 1 year before or along with the banks. So the date for insurance companies is 23, and I have a feeling that, about 2023, 2024 is when both these industries could move to Ind AS, provided that, we have a sort of a bridge between going, and we could do it for banks actually in a phased manner. So that's my view on, applicability of Ind AS for banks and insurance companies.
No, very interesting. I invite any of the panelists. Nilesh, do you have a view on this, on banks and insurance companies move to Ind AS?
Sudhir, as Charanjit, of course, didn't mention, the banks have been gearing up for the Ind AS reporting for a number of years. The pro forma reports are going to the RBI, on the Ind AS basis for quite some time. So my impression is banks are geared up. Yeah, subject to whatever specific suggestions which Charanjit gave us as phase-wise, what exact phasing he's looking at, can be discussed. But as far as insurance companies are concerned, thanks to the IFRS 17 being developed and delayed at the international level, I think possibly IRD has taken a view that they will go along with the international or maybe after some time. And there's a chicken and egg situation. Who will go first? So the banks will go first or insurance? And I would go with Charanjit that both should go together as far as the implementation is concerned. And yes, IFRS 17 is going to result in a huge change as far as systems and processes are concerned within the insurance companies. And I think that has to be transitioned properly.
Yeah, of course, it did not prevent the regulators from bringing IFRS in when NBFC as holding companies were not on Ind AS, but subsidiaries were. So, we are now used to in this country having different dates, and we do manage to do it. So I think history doesn't bear out that you need to have same gap for holding and subsidiary, But Chopra ji, let me come to you on, I think you heard earlier Nilesh mentioned about Schedule 3, and I heard so the other panelists also mentioned about Schedule 3. Tell me, why do we need Schedule 3? Did you discuss with MCA during the implementation that there are sufficient disclosure rules within the accounting standards? So why do we need Schedule 3 on the statute?
Chopra, you're on mute.
Chopra ji, are you on mute? I can't hear you. Yeah.
It is this. Let me first react on whatever, not rather react, let me give my views with regard to the implementation of Ind AS in the banks, basically, and the insurance companies, before I really move on to your other part of the question. Number one, I fully subscribe to what has been said by Charanjit as well as Nilesh. I personally don't foresee the implementation of Ind AS in the banks before 1/4/2024. There is no way that it is likely to happen to me. So far as the implementation part is concerned, at least RBI has been talking about it. They have been serious about it. Whereas IRDA was never serious about it. Let me be very clear about it. And I think as NACAS chairman also, we kept on pushing them that please bring on table whatever suggestions you have. It never came on the table, very frankly. Even their representatives were not attending the meetings. So I'm very, very, wary of the fact that insurance companies, some or the other, missed out a bus earlier also. What will happen now, I can't say, but I am very clear that 1/4/2024 should be the last date for the banks and the insurance companies to come on the table and say that we are willing to implement it. One of the major challenges that I can look at, very frankly, in the implementation of Ind AS into the banks is when we talk of the expected credit loss model. You see, we are all talking of that these prudential norms have already stabilized and the banks have been able to identify the NPAs properly. But if you ask RBI, I think RBI will give you the answer. RBI has been pressing for it that all the identification of the NPA should be through the system. But has it happened? It has not happened. There has been a lot of manual intervention. Rather, of late, the Reserve Bank of India had to put its foot down and say that by 30th June, it has to be implemented. Otherwise, we'll levy the heavy fines so far as the banks are concerned. So still there are a lot of problems so far as identification of NPAs are concerned. And I'm not talking of the agricultural advances at all, which are about 11.5 lakh crores. And we all know what is the fate of those agricultural loans. So that's another NPA. The moment we shift to the expected credit loss model, what is the level of NPA? I don't want to get into that particular part. But this is something which we will have to look at. It is bound to happen. If there is something which is going to be a loss, let's put that loss to the I think I fully agree with what Gupta has said, that whatever is to happen, let it happen. Why should we keep on shying away from certain things? The problem is, the moment the banks are going to fall short of the capital, particularly in the public sector banks, I'm talking about it. What has been happening of late is, at least in one bank, what the government has done for recapitalization. On one side, you have credited the capital. On the other side, you have issued the debentures without bearing any interest. Without bearing any interest. Now, how do you really impair those debentures, which are government guaranteed? So I personally feel we are going to implement this. All those eventualities will also follow. No doubt in my mind. And I think to me that's one of the very important factors. The government should be looking at it, and once we are getting ahead with it, we should feel whatever is going to happen. If it's capital, let's move in that particular direction. I'm quite sure that if the bankers don't move by 1/4/2024, we are actually losing the credibility in the international market so far as the banking is concerned, and we cannot afford to lose that. We must move on so far as this particular part is concerned. That's one thing that I will like to say. So far as your Schedule 3 is concerned, I think MCA so far has been clear on one part, that we need comparability. And when we talk of comparability, they feel that some kind of a format is required. We may talk of disclosures which are given in the Ind AS, which are equivalent to the IFRS, and those disclosures might be applicable, marshalling of the balance sheet, etc. MCA, some or the other, the government feels that we need to have some kind of a structure so far as the Schedule 3 is concerned, and that is why the Schedule 3 is there. And they want to monitor, they want to lay down the additional requirements through the Schedule 3, and we know what kind of requirements have been laid down effective 1/4/2021. I think these are humongous, and these are going to be real challenging so far as the corporate world is concerned. It is not easy to calculate those 11 ratios and then based upon those ratios you make a particular commitment. It will not be easy for the banks to say that whatever is there, whatever they have filed with the banks, that actually tallies with the books of accounts. I think these are the major challenges which we are going to face. But so far as your question of Schedule 3 is concerned, whereas one may tend to agree that yes, there are disclosures which are required by the Ind AS, and probably one could have said that no schedule is required. But I think, as we say on many other matters, the time is not right now. Let's mature further before we can say that no schedule is required for the sake of comparability. And then maybe you can give a transition period of another 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, whatever institute may decide in consultation with the MCA. And after that we say, okay, enough is enough and this is what it is. But till that such time, when we mature enough, when we actually stabilize enough, I think Schedule 3 can continue.
Yeah, only point that Chopraji, I think as Nilesh was illustrating, Schedule 3 now, if you see the new requirements that have been introduced for the current year and going forward what will be required, goes far beyond what the IFRS framework also requires. And it would create a lot of requirement on preparers to put that additional information out through the financial statements. The question is how much of that should be through financial statements, what should be outside financial statements. So, and the overall a question I have generally to all panelists is, do you believe that our financial statements are becoming very long and difficult to read, because with these more additional disclosures coming in, it will really be, I think the number of pages in financial statements will be very significant. And question is whether it will be readable, whether all the information is required over there.
For that matter, Sudhir, the IFRS disclosures, I think are all printing and paper industry friendly. If you really ask me to comment upon that. So similar exercise, what has happened is that there have been so many things which have happened in the country or internationally. MCA has been trying to plug it through the disclosure practices. That is what has happened. So I think maybe we will have to live with these disclosures for some time, and once the thing stabilize, probably MCA may say that okay, it is no more required. Because one of the points that one will like to say, and I think Nilesh brought it out, if I'm not mistaken, that there are companies whose names have already been struck off. There are almost 6 lakh companies whose names have been struck off from the register of the MCA or ROCs. But the transaction with those companies still continue to appear in the balance sheets of few of the companies. These are receivables, these are payables, these are given in the form of the capital, these are investments. So somewhere or the other, if nobody was catching it, the MCA is going to catch it, and the disclosure practices. And if these are what? Why only the company will say that I made an investment, I will say impair that investment. So similar could be the case of the payable also. Yes. So I think there are certain practices which the MCAs try to catch it through the disclosure practices, but the moment these are disclosed, the auditors will have to take call with regard to those transactions. So that is what is going to happen.
Yeah,
I think Mohandas wants you to speak, Sudhir. Mohandas has been wanting to speak this long, yeah. If you don't.
Sudhir,
please go.
Yeah, Sudhir, my personal view is, in whatever we do as a country, we must understand the diversity of the country and not go by the lowest common denominator, get everybody on board. That's not the right way for us. Everybody has a different need. For example, in banking, we now have the concept of a systemically important bank. There are only 3 banks, they are 50% of the banking industry. Allow them to be global. Let the other banks come up to speed, because these 3 banks have no problem of capital. They're well managed. They can raise capital. Set them free, right? Let's set them free. There's no harm. Why should they be held hostage to everybody else? So we must differentiate between institutions. See, Sudhir, we need role models in this country so everybody else can follow. If we don't create those role models which are globally competitive, globally respected, why will others follow? And we will unnecessarily be lagging behind. We will not build the skills, we will not build the capability, we will not build anything else. So we must do that. That is something that we must do as a country. And the second point about disclosure, I think we have too much of disclosure. Now, I'm a student of balance sheets. At the age of 21, I had a collection of about 2,000 annual reports. I read them. Now, I can't read them. It's so difficult. There's too much of information, too much of complexity is unnecessary. I like what Amarjit Chopra said. Let us say standstill agreement for the next 4 years. Let the institute set up a group to say, now these are the disclosure, this we feel is unnecessary, can be made voluntary. These are critical, put that there and send it to everybody. The rest of it, make it voluntary and put it up on your web page so analysts can look at it and dream about it, do whatever they want to do, where some people want more. And also any new disclosure, unless it's extremely material, don't put it, make it voluntary for the next 4 years. Reduce the burden. If you look at the IPO document, I'm sure Nilesh would have signed something. Amarjit, they're a nightmare for everybody. You know, at SEBI, we have a committee. We were trying to bring it down. We are trying our best. But it's a nightmare. There's so much of disclosures. Nobody reads that. Nobody understands that. For example, the risk factor. We've been trying to do it, but the lawyers want to, you know, there are other issues, commercial issues involved. They want to do more and more and do that. So I think we have to, as a country, simplify matters, do what is critical, and reduce the workload, unnecessary language. Sudhir, I want to end by saying, when I was CFO, I used to read the entire annual report, financial statement 3 times, end to end, just to make sure there's no mistake. Because something going wrong, some figure, you know, we didn't want it to happen. The poor auditors, imagine their fate. If you're a signing partner, you have to pray to God every time that you sign that there's no inadvertent error comes up somewhere. Only God can save you. Nobody can save you, because errors will happen because the complexity. Reduce the complexity, make it simple, make it very important to understand what is needed.
Can I come in, Sudhir?
Make a very valuable point. I think Charan wanted to make a point. So Charan and then Nilesh. Yeah, Charan, you want to say something very quickly. Charan,
you're on mute. Charan, you'll need to unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, Charan.
I just wanted to say that, you know, the users of financial statements are different, and some may need one disclosure, some may want to look at other disclosures. The issue is with the preparer and the auditor. They have to, you know, make all those disclosures. If I really look at certain disclosure that be making, except for 1 or 2 disclosures, you know, which talks about more of liquidity profile, I think that nobody clearly looks into it. But the other disclosures, some of the other user is you know, definitely interested.
Okay. So you believe that it is required.
You have an optimum level of disclosures.
Yeah.
Because again, if we try to simplify, we will be having divergences from IFRS, and again, globally we'll still be away. So we need to, you know, sort of reach that optimum level where we are compliant, we show governance, strong governance, making those disclosures, which gives comfort to the investment community.
Yeah. So, Charan, just counter use. I think we're not talking only Indians. I think in India, we have added disclosures on top of some of that also. So let's see what, Nilesh, would you like to add on?
Yeah. Sudhir, what has happened is from the time India has come, there's been a lot of focus on estimates, judgments, and assumptions. And these three are very important. And forget India. I'm saying earlier also, if you look at the terminal benefits, the gratuities and all, the complete assumptions were varying between, I would say, similar sized banks, public sector banks and all. So that gave a lot of inputs. So similarly, India has just been a few years we are there. I think let there be some comparisons happening. Let there be some sort of uniformity or benchmarking happening I would say, across industries and all. And more importantly, I would say, if you look at it, the fact that the disclosure required are based on the IFRS and the Ind AS, and that only makes the accounts complete. Yeah, I appreciate it is becoming a huge task for most of the people. So I would give two suggestions there. One is, let the accounts be as it is as per the Ind AS or the IFRS or whatever required with all the detailed disclosures. And for the majority of the people, we can have something like earlier we used to have abridged accounts. If that is failed, so for the majority of the people, to the layman and to the but for the analysts, for competition, for the accountants, for the comparison, I think let there be detailed disclosure. That is one. Coming to the second question on the MCA format and the additional requirements. My view there is, I think the uniformity which has been brought in, the comparability, thanks to the Schedule 3, in my view, it is very, very positive. I'm not talking of the additional requirements which would have been, the way Chopra Sahab mentioned and I mentioned, which can be brought in through some other reporting. But as far as the financial reporting format under Schedule 3 or Schedule 6, I think that has brought in a lot of comparability and uniformity. And I would want to continue with that. What is happening is then under IFRS also, across the world, we are still seeing there's, the comparability is not as easy. The way operating profit, EBITDA, this, that, and that, those projects are still going on across different parameters, to bring in some commonality of reporting there under the, maybe partially, but I think this has achieved some purpose. I think still the time is not there to sort of do away with it is my view. Thank you. Sudhir, I think you have gone on mute, or I think he's got hanged.
Yeah,
I think he has gone on a connectivity problem.
Yeah, I think there is some connection problem.
He's come back.
He has come back. Okay.
So MPV, I am coming to you, and as we almost at the end of this discussion, we have some very useful insights from each of the panelists and very valuable suggestions. Happy for you to make any comments on that. But just one final question for you is on how much, and I think Mohan referred to this earlier, is how can we as India aspire to contribute more to the global thinking around accounting, going forward, financial reporting going forward. How can we lead the way and contribute to that? So maybe if you can make some comments on that and also summarize. Thank you so much.
Sure. So thanks, Sudhir. Let me respond to the two questions in seriatim. So first is as far as the format of financial statements are concerned and the disclosures. Of course, there is merit in having a uniform format. But what I would like to draw attention is we have the IAS 1, which is currently under revision. And with the revised primary financial statements template, which is there, I think the uniformity of reporting will automatically be achieved. And important is to have uniformity of reporting not just within India, but also globally. So I would like to compare financial statements of Tata Steel with another French steel company. So I'd like to do that comparison as well, particularly when it comes to the top 1,000 companies, or compare State Bank with another global bank. So I think financial statements templatization is available in the Ind AS. It is available. I think what Chopraji mentioned, and I think it's a concern of MCA, and I think rightly so, is that there are this additional information or disclosures which MCA as a regulator would like to use, and they would also like the other users to use it. Those information, I think we should look at capturing it outside of the financial statements. It can be a separate section to Schedule 3. where probably you can even keep the auditors out as well. It could be more about preparers sharing that, or if we believe that an assurance makes value add, we can do that as well. But the core financial statements, I think they should be comparable with the global formats which are available. Like, for example, inside the financial statements, to have a disclosure like amounts due to MSME. So you have an Indian steel company having a disclosure in payables dues to MSME. It is not there in another global company. So that kind of information, you can capture it in another section. So that's my thought on that.
Just MP, if I may intervene over there, I think I want to take to Mohan's point, and I think what he feels is we don't differentiate, and you have like the same yardsticks for all companies, whereas we might have more mature companies, more international looking companies. Maybe you subject them to higher standards than to the rest of all the companies where it might not be productive really to do.
Correct. So that's one. Second is there's a disclosure review project which you are aware, which is currently happening in IFRS. And they have picked up 2 standards for review where the disclosures currently are huge. One is the standard on employee benefits, what Nilesh ji was also mentioning. Another is the standard on fair value. And we have an outreach program coming up on this sometime in October. We'll do it in India. And what we have found in that disclosure project is, despite so many brains working on it, eventually they're coming to the conclusion that all of the existing disclosures are important. They're unable to do away with it. So they keep debating and at the end come to the conclusion, no, it's still important. As Charan was mentioning, there are different profiles of investors who are looking at each of this, and holding back some information creates an information arbitrage to the other person as well. So in that sense, there is that project which is currently going on. Hopefully, it should lead us to reduce disclosures at some point in time or more optimal disclosures. As Chopra ji mentioned, maybe 3-4 years from now, we should achieve that status. The last point as far as India's contribution globally, and I think Chopra ji mentioned at the start, is I think my own personal view, I think we should come out of the mindset that IFRS is some alien standard and not our standards. As long as we are participating in the development of the IFRS, and Chopra ji highlighted so beautifully that India has been actively participating in development of IFRS. He gave the example of agriculture standard, and he also talked about the fact that India participates in every exposure draft, and the institute has committed substantial amount of resources and time in terms of participating in all of these international forums like Asia Oceanic Standard Setters Group, Emerging Economies Group, IFAS, and things like that. I think we have made a lot of work there. And once we start participating in the international standard setting process, my view, those standards are our own standards. And once we get that feel, I think this discussion of IFRS in India itself will automatically die. And it's a matter of time. It's a journey though. I think our first focus should be to get banks and insurance on the India's roadmap. My only request is from Nilesh ji and Majid ji, if you can have a quick guidance. Chopra ji, Mohan and Charanjit were aligned on this. Just like NBFCs, we had a 2-phase shift to India's. Can we look at banks and insurance also doing a 2-phase shift to India's? If we can have a quick yes/no, it will be guidance to the ASB for deliberating with MCA. Your views, sir. I have not heard from both of you earlier on this.
No, I will like to go with it. You see what one wants. Number one, I will like to say that you said that we should treat IFRS as alien. I personally feel IFRS to me means Indian formulated reporting standards.
I didn't say alien, sir.
International financial reporting standards.
I said we should not treat as alien.
So the moment I start reading it as Indian formulated reporting standards, the matter ends there. So to me, that's very important. The other thing that one will like to say is that as Mohan also put it, there are systemically important banks in this country. You can put it as SBI, you can put it as ICICI, You can put it as Bank of Baroda, you can put it as Canara Bank or PNB, etc. Forget about Bank of Maharashtra or forget about Punjab and Sindh Bank. These smaller banks you can forget. You can forget about UCO Bank or Central Bank for the time being. If these 5 or 6 banks, the top banks, which includes your State Bank of India, Canara Bank, Bank of Baroda, PNB, Union Bank, if you can bring them at Ind AS, basically, I think it will be good enough in the first phase. There is no harm in doing it. And I think that will be a good move. And to begin with, in the insurance companies, bring LIC first on the Ind AS and then follow it with the other insurance companies. I think it is the LIC which has been the stumbling block than anything else. So let's first put LIC on the map and then bring the others onto the map. So that will solve a lot of problem. To my mind, there is no harm in going in a staggered form so far as the implementation of Ind AS is concerned in this sector. And we can tell to the world that we have implemented in our biggest institutions, basically, so far as these two segments are concerned. And that will do well.
MPV, my view is slightly different there. I think as far as insurance is concerned, it should be all the companies, not LIC, and all together. Number two, as far as banks are concerned, I would have a larger sort of segregation in the phase. One is all private banks, public sector banks, small finance banks, etc. They should go for IFRS immediately. Maybe we may leave apart the cooperative banks at this juncture. The phasing, I am of the view, whether it is State Bank or Central Bank, in my view, there's no difference. Both have to go together because comparability from a RBI perspective, from the investor perspective, will be skewed, I think, whether it's India or internationally. So this whole segment, of PSB, private banks, as well as SFB, small finance banks of the works, they should be at one shot. And possibly cooperative banks can be given maybe 5 years or whatever time frame they is required to do that. So that's the phasing as far as banks is concerned. More importantly, let me use this opportunity to give, credit to number one, Mr. Chopra for starting that whole, debate at the international level for responding to the international. I remember again, I was part of that group which was given the mandate. And number two, to MP Vijay Kumar, I think from the time you have joined the council and the focus, the impetus, we all of us are ideating on that we need to have more on the international level. And the support and the push which you gave MPV, I remember when I was vice president as a council member, I think that has made all the bodies which are representing, and much more we need to do now. And I think we're in the right direction. So let me compliment you also.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for those comments. With that, I'd just like to thank Amarjit ji, Nilesh, Mohan and Ranjit for those very candid comments on this panel discussion. To me, it's been a very enriching, enlightening discussion. And I think I would like to close the panel on a note of positivity as Mohan started. I think we've done incredibly well over these years in establishing a very mature financial reporting framework. We've discussed a number of topics on this panel which are possibly improvement areas which should be there in any reporting framework, and it's also part of the progress of the economy which is creating newer needs from the financial reporting framework, and that's what I think as an institute, the Accounting Standard Board and the institute is fairly well positioned to respond. So thank you again, gentlemen, for that active participation in the panel, and hand you over back to Parminder and MPV. Thank you.
So thanks, Sudhir, for a wonderfully moderated panel discussion, and apologies that on a well-earned holiday after 2 years for 3 days, we stole off 1 day out of those 3 days. Thanks for being so accommodative. I was very particular that with such a high power panel, you should be there to moderate it. So thanks for accepting our invite. And just let me conclude by quoting our founder president, late Shri G.P. Kapadia, whose words in 1950 hold true now. The profession's resilience and practice to respond to changing situation and growing demands on it will determine its continued existence and growth, unquote. I should acknowledge that we have a very strong technical directorate at the Institute and staff at the Accounting Standards Board, whose contribution, Chopraji, Nileshji, yourself, Chanjit, all of you have seen it in person, and I've been gifted now to work with them very closely. I'm proud of and happy to share that their efforts are very well acknowledged by all regulators we interact with. Compliments to them for this event today. We will continue to strive towards making India leading and contributing to the accountancy profession at global level. It's a crucial period with challenges to face and opportunities to seize. But we have both the will and the strength to resolve and adapt. I may mention that we are committed to take all necessary transformational steps and work with other regulators to take this journey ahead, serve the nation, and lead the development of financial reporting principles at the global fora. Thank you all once again. Over to you, Parminder.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks a lot for your kind words. Thanks to respected panel members for their candid views, for their rational, frank views, and for their suggestions for us to take this journey ahead. We promise that we will do our best to take this journey ahead, and we are very thankful to our chairman for his guidance, and he is a source of inspiration for us. The way he works, the hard work he put in, and we really learn from him. We have always learned from even the panel members with whom we have worked. We have learned all the way a lot. They are true visionaries. And during these deliberations, I realized once again that why Chairman ASB was so particular to have all these visionaries on the panel today. So thanks a lot for your guidance. Thanks a lot, and stay happy, stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you so much.
Thanks to all the participants from across the country.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sudhir, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mohan.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Mohan. Thanks, Charanjit.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Great panel. Very, very happy to hear. I think brilliant panel. Thank you. Thank you, Sudhir.
Bye.
Great one.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.